Well, if you're like me, there are times when you love to hear news. Not all the news these days is the sort of thing that makes me happy, but one news piece came recently that just caused me to chuckle out loud. And that was learning that Shauna Murphy has been named the new executive director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in Indianapolis. You may remember that Shauna was on the podcast several months ago. And so we're going to provide you with this encore performance of that event, and we'll provide links to another podcast that we did with Shauna. She's a terrific person, and I encourage you to listen again to the wisdom of this good woman, Shauna Murphy. Greetings. This is Philip Amerson again with the To Be and Do podcast, a part of the Belonging Exchange. And today I get to speak with someone I've known for a few years. This is one of my many teachers. She doesn't know it, but she taught me many things along the way. When you get to be my age, Shauna Murphy, you get to look back and say, oh, they were trying to teach me. Shauna, I could tell you many wonderful things about her, but she says she just wants to be introduced as a proud parent of an 18-year-old son who gives her reason to get up every morning and to push forward even on the days when she doesn't feel like moving on.
Yeah.
Shauna, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Well, Phil, it's nice to hear that I'm a teacher to you because there are things that I learned from you, particularly around how to put together the gifts and talents of other people to make life easier on yourself. I couldn't absorb that as an 18-year-old, but as a 55-year-old, I'm all about that life. It's like, how do we bring together all the people that are needed so that it
Yeah,
doesn't fall on you and there's no hero story.
exactly.
Everybody, yeah.
Aren't we tired of having people who have to wear white hats, who have to be
Oh
the
my
hero in
gosh.
every story?
Yeah, yeah,
It
and the
just it
idea
just
that
is
hat is heavy. I don't
yeah,
want it.
yeah. And part of what we learned, I think together, I maybe knew some of this before I knew you, but just to go around the blocks there of your neighborhood, all the talent that was there,
Mhm.
right around Broadway Church, and many people said, "Oh, that's a low wealth neighborhood. There's no," but man, I get
Yeah.
to thinking about just an afternoon sitting on the porch with Doris Danner.
Oh my gosh, yeah, oh, Mr. Danner. Yeah,
And
yeah.
or I could go up and down the street. And so tell me what it was like to grow up and live in that neighborhood.
Well, in retrospect, I wouldn't change there are some things I would have changed for sure because being poor is not a romantic experience when you're living it, period. Um But that was material poverty. What we did have, and what I remind people who are in social service and even the medical industries that are community based, is that you close every day. Life doesn't close in communities. And
There
so
you
when
are.
things would jump off when the church was closed, we had like Joe Lewis, who lived across the street from the Bridge House. You
Yeah.
know, Joe came to get a bird out of our house. Of course, he bought a gun, but But, and like you said, Mr. Danner employed kids in the neighborhood, took us out and taught us lawn care things, and those types of invisible economies are not recognized when you are sitting from a helping perch. And so growing up, I was able to learn very quickly that they're good cooks. Do you remember we went to Washington, D.C., and we went on a very short bus? We didn't have a lot of money, but we had more plastic bags of fried chicken and boiled eggs, and so those invisible economies are what strengthened all of us, knowing that at the end of the day, when everything else is closed, your neighbor would be there for you. They might talk bad about you behind your back, but no one was going to let you be without if they had something to give.
and the giving was food, but it was also story, it was
Mhm,
friendship, it
mhm.
was well, in the case of Mr. Danner, I I still remember sitting talking, and all of a sudden I found out he was a Baptist preacher as well, and he could talk theologians that I'd never read.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
and like my, stepfather, gardening,
Right.
remember his stories, his, tomatoes as big as your head and, you know?
You wouldn't know this, but I don't know if you remember Betty Jane Kyle.
Mm-mm.
She wore a big hat in church. And
Okay.
one Sunday she said, I'm going to meet you in your office after church. And so she came down and she said, I want to take you for a walk. Now, Betty Jane was struggling with lung disease. And so she would huff and puff. But she took me for a walk up Park and across on 30th and then back down through the alley there between Park and Broadway. And she stopped midway through the alley and started pointing to the gardens.
Mhm.
And then she said, now, preacher, until you've seen this church from this point of view, you haven't seen the church.
Isn't that something?
So she helped me know, even though she still was probably working with an old kind of view of top down, we're going to help these people,
Mhm.
she also had an appreciation for the gifts that were there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is they were invisible to those who were too threatened to see them. So what happens when
Yeah,
I actually see what you are capable of, what you want to provide, what you are providing, if I've positioned myself as coming in to rescue you from something? And
yeah.
some of the work that I do with the helpers of the world, the first thing I ask them is, "Who asked you to do this?" Because,
Very
you
good.
know, well, they're not showing up for this, they're not doing this, the finger pointing and victim blaming, but it's like, who of this group asked you to come in and do any of the things that you're doing?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
exactly. So, if I remember correctly, you were there during the desegregation days, and your neighbors, you and other kids, were being bused to Decatur Central.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think the point of the exercise was to tell us that we were poor, as if we didn't
Oh,
already know. you know um Educationally, I can't make an argument for or against whether or not it was better just in terms of pure academics, but in terms of social space, what it did was require a degree of resilience of children that should not be required of any human regardless of
oh
their
my,
age. I would
yeah.
tell people all the time that with the number of students who were either put out or dropped out, there went the cure to AIDS. It was on the street corner because of racism, or just for just being tired. A 40-minute bus ride to and from. I mean, you have to have a mother like Ernestine who's like, I will pop up on the exit ramp to make sure you're on that bus. Not many parents could do that, even if they wanted to. So just the resilience factor. It was not a measure of whether or not, I mean, of course, I'm smart. I didn't need validation from white people to tell me that. Um, but to require that degree of resilience is an unfair proposition for any child.
That's right. And there were all of these hidden ways. I mean, desegregation was well-meaning,
Hmm.
but poorly executed.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the road to hell started with, right? And we literally were on the road to hell. And,
Yeah.
you had a situation where we grew up in an all black environment in terms of our teachers who lived in our community. So we had a strong sense of self definition. Um, we also had, like Drew, your son, we had the few white people who lived in the community that were also part of our community. Then all of a sudden, we're separated from one another. So,
I
in that,
know.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
know.
resegregated in the attempt to desegregate.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's do you remember that because of the 40-minute bus ride, they claimed that, well, we don't need then to have kindergarten in the neighborhood
Mhm.
because it's only half day and those children. And if you remember, Sadie Flowers decided she was going to set up her own darn kindergarten.
Yes. Yes. Yes, but that again is another example of just overlooking what existed without no interrogation at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I know you've worked in the area of education. Do you think the resilience you developed in those years has borne fruit in what you've been doing over the last decade or two?
Absolutely. The resilience and just being raised in a strong faith tradition. Because without those two, I don't know what I would be doing, nor do I believe I would be mentally stable.
Yeah.
Because when you come at it from and even within my family, my heart beats with those who are at tables, but not at certain tables. So
Yeah.
the idea of having a seat at the tables, like we have our own tables and we have our own power at the table, but you ignore it and trying and figuring out, not trying, but figuring out ways to bring people into spaces with power immediately, not to witness, not to learn, is very hard because there's one example where this woman who works for a foundation, she was like, I'm not adding seats to the table. I'm removing people from the table so that others can sit at this table,
Uh,
which was a bold and powerful move. And she caught
yeah,
all kind of hell for it.
I'll
But
bet.
that's the type of work that invigorates me, but it's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
to constantly push against narratives that are just flat out not true.
Yeah.
And,
And right now in this nation and in this state, the narratives are just I am just astonished by the attack on DEI, for instance. I don't understand where there's any kind of ethical basis for that.
yeah, there is none, but, I mean, the ethical implementation, depending on where you are, wasn't always evident either. And so for me as a Black female, I have a, very nuanced approach to how all this is happening. For one, it's very mean-spirited,
Yeah.
and it's not rooted in anything other than meanness and racism.
Yeah.
Um and I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's very mean and very racist. With that though, when you look at the primary beneficiaries of these alleged attempts and you look at the timing of which they were launched, it really didn't have a lot to do with making things equitable for the target population, for Black folk, for queer folk, for folks that have different physical abilities.
Or
So
poor
again,
white folks.
or poor white folks. But if you
Yeah.
happen to be a white female business owner or a very well educated white woman who needs a primary mentor to move you through into and through spaces, that was the perfect program for you.
Yeah.
And so,
So, talk about I know one of the things we want to talk about, and we have been, but not naming it as this. We want to talk about the abundance that's all around already. And how do you, as a mom and as a professional, uh, help show the abundance that may be not so evident to other people?
well, the first thing I tell people is you have to be willing to strain your eyes to see it because sometimes it's not as evident. And then it's really about the questions that you ask. I'll use the example of one of the doctors that I've worked with. She was getting terrible reviews, just terrible reviews from her patients, her evaluations, and she just was wringing her hands. And I just asked her, I'm like, well, what do you know about them? You
Wow.
know, and she knew all of their medical history. I'm like, well, how many kids do they have? Who do they
Wow.
go to when you guys are closed and they need something? What kind of activities what's the last song they danced to? And
Wow.
she wrote the questions down on a sticky note and started asking those when she went into her consultations with her patients. The return rates went up and her evaluations went up. But she wasn't looking at them as abundant total people. She was looking at them as people with certain health markers. And
That is very helpful. Yeah.
yeah, you know, and that's really the way that I look for abundance is I really look for where are people playing? Where are people
Ah,
laughing? Where are people just having the best time? Where do people light up? What question do you ask? I do this a lot. What's the last song you danced to?
there you go.
You know, and people start humming, start shaking shoulders. A few get mad at their husbands and wives, like, "We haven't danced in so long."
Mhm.
But it's a
You-
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just that's the point of connection. That's where abundance starts. It's like, where do we connect as humans?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm concerned about right now is healthcare.
Mhm.
And you've just mentioned a good illustration. IU Health is supposed to have a health district that somehow is in the neighborhood around. But when I go to certain meetings and I ask what their evaluative markers are, I just get the eyes glaze over.
Mhm.
There's no sense of how the community uh, enjoys many gifts and shares many gifts, and those are important to health.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things like here we have this program that I won't name, but it's like, why are you paying an organization to check blood pressures and blood sugars when I can go and buy everything I need from a CVS to do that myself? Why can't you train the healers that are in communities already and have them do that? They can record the same information and they are fixtures in the community. It's not that hard. But it's about will.
Yeah, Dr. John Rich, were you on the trip to visit with him in Philadelphia?
No.
Or yeah, he was Harvard educated and had been a doctor at Massachusetts General, but he went to Drexel in Philadelphia, and that was his primary concern. Who are the healers that are already here?
Mhm, mhm.
Who and part of what he pointed out was this was of course shortly after Vietnam. He said you've got all these young men that are trained as medics already living in these
Yes.
neighborhoods.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
You know,
and you build a
so
whole yeah, go ahead.
no. So that's a part of what we mean. I think what I mean, and I suspect you do too, by the abundance that's all around.
Mhm,
Uh, the women who know how to cook healthy food, the gardens in the backyards that grow healthier food,
mhm.
the ways people party together and laugh together, and hold one another accountable to take care of themselves.
Yeah. So I'm a part of this group. I have on one of their shirts right now called, Girl Trek, and what they did is they I can't remember how long they've been in existence, but I've been a part of this group for the last 4 years, and all they ask women to get together and walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, because
Terrific.
isolation is one of the leading causes of death for African American women. And so just to break down the isolate all we do we get out and we go for a walk. You don't have to walk fast, you don't have to walk slow. I shout them out when I can because I was in a really dark place after the murder of Drayshawn Reed and George Floyd, which
Right.
is why I tapped into this group, and I literally walked myself back to health with lots of prayer and tears and everything, but as a collective, you can do that. The other thing I'll say is that when I started doing the work with, the Eskenazi folks, I refused to work with their intake workers. I would
Wow.
only work with the people who saw patients
Wow.
because patients make their decisions on whether or not they're going to come back based on how they're treated by their doctors or their primary care provider. And in that work, we saw great results when we broke down all the things. It started with pointing out your own mission statement does not acknowledge the abundance. Because you talk about the disenfranchised, the this, the this. It's like, how would you like to be described in those ways?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
It
um, I can go on and on, but the what I'm getting at is that the medical industry could be way more effective and get rid of all these ginormous buildings that they keep building here in Indianapolis if they took the time to spend the time and really talk with people. Take off your white coats, put on some tennis shoes, and just ask questions. The fear factor astounds me because being black, I'll just go in anywhere. If you're gonna kill me down here in Greenwood or wherever, you just gonna do it. But people want to be talked to and acknowledged regardless of their race.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what this whole broadcast is about. And thank you for sharing with us today. We're going to talk with Shauna again on an upcoming broadcast. And I think you can tell why she's here because this is the belonging exchange, where we say that relationship is more important than any kind of rational thing you can bring.
Mhm.
And interrelatedness is maybe more important. Interdependence is more important than independence. And so, Shauna, thank you for being with us today. And we're going to talk with you again on the next podcast. Philip Amerson and Shauna Murphy with the Belonging Exchange to Be and Do podcast.